Hi everybody, welcome to this week's video demonstration here on the Beauty of Pastel. I am Bethany and today I am working on a reference that I have painted before and you may have seen it. It was a painting called Our Blessed Summer. Now, one thing that I love to do in my own practice if I'm kind of out of ideas is I repaint paintings. I'm using the same reference today as Our Blessed Summer, but just choosing a little bit different palette and approaching it in a slightly different way. I hope you enjoy. I'm so excited to paint buildings in the landscape for you guys, to show you exactly how I place objects, of course human-built objects, into our beautiful land. Couldn't help but look back at one of the most popular videos I have over on YouTube, which is my rendition of a painting called Our Blessed Summer, of just a structure, a blue structure in a landscape. And so what I decided to do instead, which I thought would be really fun, would recreate this piece a little differently, just because of course I've evolved as an artist, but also just to show you how I put buildings in the landscape, and just recreating this piece with a little different palette and feel. So what I'm doing right now is, of course, using UArt 500 grit. This is, I have it taped off to about a 12 by 12, and I am marking in the roof line and really looking at, in this photograph, measure and see exactly where and how steep the angles from the beginning. Of course, this is just my general map. I often say that about my work. And one note about how exactly I work. My painting is going to change. I'm going to change it. This is my normal way of working, how I will gesture, sketch in the major shapes. There's a little bit of experimentation that goes on when I paint. Blocking in the cool or shadow areas, tree areas, with a dark blue NuPastel, actually two colors of NuPastel, a spruce blue and an indigo blue, and then I'm washing that in with rubbing alcohol, 91% isopropyl alcohol. It dries very quickly. On UArt, it doesn't make the paper buckle at all. Using a fan brush to just whisk that in to make a wash into the paper. When sketching in the house, I didn't apply any pastel on top of it, and really the major thing that I would say that I like to do with houses, structures, barns, any kind of structure, fences even, I like them to be really nestled into bushes and trees. Edges and hidden edges, disappearing edges, softer edges, where we don't have to painstakingly render each hard line, because they can be difficult. Perspective can be a difficult thing to master. And so if we control that by snuggling our buildings into the landscape, then we can control how many angles we have to properly render. Nature is right here the king. The structure is an element of it, but it's being supported by the nature around it. And so this piece is no different. I've put in magenta in the grasses for the warmer areas of the sun, and also putting that in with rubbing alcohol. And I also kind of hit the backs of those trees with some orchid pastel. I am putting in very dark NuPastel at the edges of the building and then washing it in with alcohol. I really want those areas to be pretty opaque. Yes, I am going back and forth with rubbing alcohol and with NuPastel. You can apply the NuPastel even when the paper is still wet. I like to do that. I'm kind of making some little tree trunks, strengthening the values of this underpainting. It's pretty messy right now, course, as Pastelists, we all know that there's always a messy stage before it starts to come to life, and you just kind of have to learn how to get through that stage. Okay, I'm gonna start working on the trees in the back. I wanna push them off into the background using this orchid NuPastel. I love this NuPastel because it just blends really well with that indigo NuPastel that I also love to use. Also using one of my newer Terry Ludwig, very cool kind of light greens here. It's a cool minty green. Layering it a little bit over that orchid pastel to just push those trees back. I'm gonna change the structure of these trees, make them look a little different. We're gonna go in a different direction than just these kind of bushy tops of the trees. If you look at my old Blessed Summer pastel, that this is basically kind of how the trees are. And so this is how, as artists, we can use our own work as reference and as a jumping off point. But we also don't have to just strictly recreate things. It's a great exercise to try to recreate a painting you've done, especially a painting you've done several years ago, to see exactly how you've grown, what are you better at, what would you like to change about the piece, and how can you make it a little bit different or more applicable to where you are as an artist today. I'm putting in really dark, warm greens right now. I'm really wanting to keep this area very shaded. I don't want to bring in any of those bright warm greens yet, or any value that's too light, but I'm not loving the sky right now. Wash that out. Tone the paper with this color. Greens in your skies are a great way to create moodiness. If you ever want to do any kind of nocturnes or moody pieces, having green as your underpainting color is a great color. I'm starting to fill in the blues and the values of the building, and I'm using the shaded area of the building. I used a very neutral, darker kind of gray blue, and then also a lighter, more clear blue for where the sunlight may be hitting that front edge of the building. I'm also putting in some cool general tone as what I had put in the trees, these very cool minty greens at the edges of the blue shadows in the grass, and also starting to experiment. I want the colors to marry, and so using those same cool minty greens in the trees as are in the grass helps with that color harmony. Making very light, gentle marks, using very light gestures will help you so much with your experimentation phase, especially if you're looking at one of your older pieces saying, I love the palette I picked for this painting. I'm gonna see if I can make that palette onto this reference photo. Right now I'm also experimenting with the sky color. So I thought, well, let's see do I want this to be a yellow sky or not. Throughout painting this piece, I'm gonna be going back and forth between the building and the trees and the sky and the grasses, following the same mantra that I often talk about when you're happy enough with one thing, or if you don't know quite what you want to do, move on to the next thing. Move on, I didn't quite know, do I really like that yellow in the sky? I only put a little bit of it. Let it kind of absorb in my brain, in my periphery, to see if I think that it might work for this piece. I like to use pastel pencils and sometimes graphite. This is just a graphite pencil. I'm re-sketching the roof line. I'm also love graphite. I love charcoal to create the deep shadows underneath the eaves. Wanting those values to be very accurate. This is such a fun part of painting buildings, is getting all of those little shadows and all your little highlights accurate and correct. Taking in some alcohol right there just to darken and sharpen those lines, and you can also whisk the pastel up over on top of it to create foliage, and really being careful where the sun would be and how it might be affecting the shadows of the roof and where it would be hitting. Really observe buildings in your landscape. If you're on a walk in your neighborhood and you see a beautiful home that has really cool shadows on it cast by the roof or cast by trees nearby, take a quick picture of it. This was a house in a little town in East Far East Texas. I have a good friend that lives there and I visit her often, and we go on hunts for fun homes like this. And this was just a very distant little cottage tucked in these trees. I want to bring in a little bit of color to my grasses, and so I'm using some pretty neutral golden yellows, just hitting it a little bit over that magenta. I love to keep a lot of the underpainting showing through. It helps warm up the piece, brings some liveliness and transparency also to your pastels. I'm also wanting to start to put in some more shadows over this roof line. Of course, within a painting, sometimes a reference photo, you're not going to see all the details that you might need. Playing with the sky here, but it is going to change even still. Working through what I feel are problems. I don't like how the trees look too close to the house. I want to create more of a shade feeling of shelter, working that out in my mind, stepping back a lot, seeing what can I do that will help this piece have a stronger composition and more interesting composition maybe than what it is right now. I like the little side roof of this building, and so that's what I'm working on right now, adding in the angles of how that little part juts out, and then how there's like a little kind of alcove or little cuts in, really wanting to make sure that my roof line is pretty straight there. That's a charcoal pencil that I'm using, wanting to check the angles of my piece. Using that charcoal to just glaze in that deep shadow very, very gently. Still going back and forth with this charcoal, with the ruler. Don't be afraid to take out a ruler. Don't be afraid to use tools that will help you achieve whatever technique or effect that you want to use. If a ruler is going to help you, then pull out that ruler. This building, there's a tree right there at the front far left edge of that building. But I do want there to be signs of that building peeking in and out from behind that tree. And that's another way that you can nestle your buildings within, is not creating necessarily sky holes, but creating building holes. Just putting a little bit of that roof line color, darker of course, same kind of concept as when we use sky holes, but putting it in between, making tiny little marks to create trunks to indicate that this building keeps going back, not just stopping there at that left tree. This is usually when I use those tiny little shards of some kind of broken pastel that I have. This is where, those very, very small pieces come in handy because we can make more accurate marks. I don't have a very light blue pencil, pastel pencil this color, and this is kind of the same color of that front sunlit area. Since there is so much purple and magenta in the grasses, I put a little bit up there in those trees, and then I'm also using, this is a Giraud pastel. I'm also using some dark, warm greens. The shaded areas, I don't want to put in a lot of bright greens here. I like to use those purples for the grasses, especially over areas that are in shadow. So I want to limit the greens in my grasses here.
I hope you enjoyed watching that pastel come to life. It was so much fun to paint. It's always fun to teach you new techniques, and I hope you learned something. If you did, please give this video a like. I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and hit that little notification bell so you can know when a new video comes available. If you'd also like to help support this content coming out, every little bit helps. I would love it if you would consider visiting my Patreon page. The link is right here. Thank you so much for considering it. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and I will see you around.